That don't know me, my name is Michelle McGrath. I am the coordinator for the Waunakee Community Cares Coalition. So a little bit about the coalition, some of you may have heard of us before, but we work throughout our school district and our community to make sure that it's healthy and resilient. We received a drug-free community grant 4 years ago, which is a pretty substantial grant. So we could do great things in our schools and our community around prevention and mental health. Every year we host a series of April wellness events here at the library. And we're so grateful to have a collaboration with Amy and the library here. And we've been doing this, like I said, for the past several years. And this is the first of many opportunities this month. We have brochures over there on the left, so you can grab one on your way out. But every week there'll be some information and some really great presenters here. I will say, I have to duck out because tomorrow we have a speaker, Carlos, who's coming in from California, who's speaking to our high school and middle level students all day tomorrow. And I forgot I had to pick him up at the airport tonight. I'm like, oh, that's right. I will see you soon. So thankfully, I have lots of great teammates here. Maddie Zaleski in the back, she's our communications coordinator. And Brian Kirsten soon will be here, and he's our board president for the coalition, does a lot of great work. Former high school principal, so a lot of you might know of him. So like I said, all of our events are around prevention and mental health. This one in particular, we are really just super fortunate to have Tom Farley. He's a member of our coalition. He's a member of our community. He has done lots of work with our students at the high school. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Tom and I, Maddie, we facilitated a whole day almost. It was a 4-hour opportunity, a leadership summit for our students they had lots of leadership building, communication building, as well as just talking about things that they wanted to improve in their school and create impact. So it was a wonderful day, and we were fortunate to have Tom meet our students and be a part of that. And now we are so excited to share his message with the community as well. And I'm not going to steal any of his thunder because he has lots of great stories from some unfortunate circumstances, but I think you are going to leave here tonight with hopefully a new look on how you might reach out and be a foundation for mental health and resiliency in our community, and how you might want to do more things, even with the coalition. So with that, please join me in welcoming Tom Farley with us tonight.
All right. Yeah, it is great because I didn't have to travel far at all. I just live down in Westport. So wonderful to be here. Yeah, let's just get the Chris story out of the way right away. So I know but just remember you're here to see me. But we'll talk. All right. So let me just tell you like a little bit of what my life was like growing up. So I think it was 1996, and I am working in New York on Wall Street for Bear Stearns. You can Google it. It's not there anymore, but and I get a call, and it's from my little brother. I call him Chris, and so Chris says, "Tommy, I'm in town." He had just done 5 years at SNL, and he was out in LA making movies, and he's back in town. He goes, "Tommy, let's have dinner." "I'm in town, let's have dinner." I go, "I'd love to have dinner, that'd be great." So he said, "All right, 5 o'clock after work, meet me at my, I've got just a hotel room down the street. My office is on Park Avenue. My desk was down in the basement in some cubicle, but my office was on Park Avenue." He said, "I'm at the Waldorf just down the street." I said, "Okay." So 5 o'clock comes along, and I start walking down the street, and I'm walking down the street, my nice suit and a nice tie, and walking down Park Avenue in New York, thinking I'm just like I own the city, even though I'm walking to like this, the suite at the Waldorf that my little brother is ensconced in. But I get down there, and he's got some other guy in his room, and he goes in his suite, I should say, and he goes, "Give me 5 minutes. We just got to talk some stuff out." And I said, "Sure." So I sit down. pick up a magazine, start reading it. A couple minutes later, I kind of look up, see what's going on, because I didn't hear much talking. And Chris and Sky are on the other side of the room just looking at me. I'm like, oh, all right, that's weird. A few minutes later, I get up and I walk over to the kitchen area to get a bottle of water. And I'm walking back across the suite. And I look over, and Chris and the Sky are watching me just walk the whole way. I'm like, and I sit down, and I start to think, like, well, how did this happen? I did everything right. I was supposed to, I towed the line, and Chris was right behind me, doing everything opposite of me, falling over that line and making friends and all that kind of stuff I hated. And I was thinking of all the stuff that happened growing up. I remember one time we were at summer camp. My parents would send, there were 4 boys in the family. We had an older sister, Barbara. She was good. So but the boys went to camp. So we went up to Woodruff for 7 weeks, all boys camp. And I remember one time when we were like 10 or 12. This camp, they would take all the Catholic boys and they put us on a bus and send us on Sundays into town to go to church. There was only a handful of us. And we loved it because we got out of cleaning the cabins, and we also got to see the girls from the camp across the girls camp across the way. And this being Wisconsin, it wasn't an indoor church. It was like outside under the pines, these wooden benches, beautiful. But it was August. It was 90 degrees. It was brutal hot this one time. And I'm walking up to communion. Chris is in front of me, and I see him just start wavering. And I'm like, what is that? And I don't know where he got them, because we're not supposed to have candy at camp, but he found some Tic Tacs and he had it and he put them in his mouth. And he's going up. And as soon as we get next to the girls' camp, he goes down and he slaps his hand on the wooden bench, head goes back, spits out all the Tic Tac like his teeth. And all these girls are like going, oh yeah, that's so gross. All my friends are laughing hysterically. And I'm like, don't laugh at it. That's not funny. It was hysterical. But no, not funny. Another time we were, again, another church story, because that's where we had our best work in church. We had to be altar boys growing up. So it was an Easter Sunday mass. It was at St. Raphael's. That's no longer here either. That burnt down. Just, it's like Bear Stearns. And there was like 5 priests, on the altar, like 4 priests, the bishop, the good one, not this last. And the problem with us in the Farley family is we got like ridiculous ADHD, and so we were always kind of looking out in the audience. Is it an audience? Yeah, see like some classmate that we can make fun of, make faces at, and we would totally lose track of the church. But there was of the mass, and there was one time in the mass back then where you had to ring a bell. And that was my job because I was the oldest. And I'm goofing around. And all of a sudden, I hear next to me, Tommy. And I went, oh, whoa. And I grab the bell and start ringing. I see every priest on the altar just kind of stop and look like, what the hell are you doing? I was at least 5 minutes early on the bell. And as soon as that like hit me, that moment, like, oh my God, what did I do? I hear next to me, I'm like, oh my God, like you totally set me up. There's nothing you can do. You're on, yeah, it was brutal. And then just, being in high school, I was a senior, he was a sophomore, just being in the same building with this, knowing he was in the building was an anxiety. I would just be, I remember one time being in the hallway, trying to talk to this girl, failing miserably, asking her to some dance or whatever. And I'm talking to her, just praying that, he wouldn't, come around the corner. But sure enough, he did. He comes bounding around the corner. I'm like, please, just don't notice me. He's walking up, talking to friends. Like, maybe he doesn't notice me. And I just kind of, just try to be as inconspicuous as I could. And I thought maybe this one time, I'm going to get, a reprieve. No. He gets right up next to me and he stops. He goes, oh, Tommy, you wet the bed again last night. Mom's really pissed. And just keeps walking. And this girl just looks at me. She's like, what is wrong with your family? And I'm like, lots. So I'm just thinking of all this stuff, and I'm just shaking my head. And I look up across the street, and Chris and this guy are looking at me still. And I'm like, okay, stop. What's going on here? And Chris just starts laughing. He goes, okay, sorry, Tommy. This is a producer of my next movie where I'm going to play the younger knucklehead brother of this guy that's running for the governor of the state of Washington. It turned out to be the movie Black Sheep. And this producer came up to me today. He said, Chris, we got a problem. Chris goes, well, what's the problem? He goes, well, we're having a tough time casting. We're trying to figure out what the serious, uptight older brother of you would look like. He's like, oh, I'll have him here in 5 minutes. That's when he called me to go to dinner. So, I mean, I was always just ripe for all of his stuff. It was crazy. So that was, as I like to say, I always, when I go into schools, it's like, does anyone have a ridiculous pain in the ass younger brother? And the hands go up. I go, yeah. Well, your brother's name was Ned. Mine's Chris Farley. And the Chris Farley at 12 is the same one you remember at 23. Wasn't fun sharing that bedroom. But but I like to say, growing up here on the, just on the north side, east side of Madison, we, in our family, we checked 3 boxes, as I like to say. We checked 3 boxes. We had a kind of a long, as far as I can tell, long family history of drinking. We are Irish, and we lived in Wisconsin. Checking any one of those boxes would have been enough. We checked all 3, and all 3 of those things, drinking was very normative. It was part of your identity. If you were a Farley, you drank. If you're Irish, you drank. If you lived in Wisconsin, you know that story. But we thought it was just normative. And when I went away to college, I went out east to Washington D.C. to college. I thought that's what college kids did as well, because my model was down on campus. I thought that was normal. So I'm sure I stuck out, but it was all these safe environments. And, it wasn't until Chris and I were both in New York working, well, I was working, I don't know what he was doing, that I started to see him struggling. And that's when I got my first kind of idea of what a first responder was supposed to be, although I didn't do it the right way. It was obviously well before 9/11, so we didn't know. I thought as an older brother, I had to come up with the solutions and the answers and really all that stuff, because the rest of my family was in Wisconsin. What I didn't know is all I needed to do was connect. The big help is coming. The first responder just needs to be there to connect, not come with all the answers and everything. So, but that's when I really started to see that there was something kind of growing with Chris. And the thing is, with us and our family, it took us a long time, if ever, because we early on we just didn't know how to do, when you have somebody in your family that's that much worse. It was really easy for us to point to Chris and say, well, we're not that bad, so I guess we're okay, which we did. And we weren't. There's a reason why none of us drink to this day, but because of that, we couldn't help Chris as much as we wanted to or could have, because, well, there's a lot of things. There was the whole family dynamic, and my parents, we'll handle this. You don't have to worry about it. But there was also the thing of, like, we didn't want to really address Chris's problem because we were afraid that we would have to address ours. We didn't want to go there. And so we kind of held back to protect ourselves. and wasn't very helpful, as a family unit. So Chris was on his own, and we saw it as that's Chris's problem. So so it was like 26 years ago. I was living in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I was meeting with a friend of mine that I went to Georgetown with that had done some work in the entertainment industry, and we were kind of getting together, and we were trying to come up with some kind of fun project or some charity thing that something that we could bring Chris and his friends in, something that'd be really fun for. And he always, when we were meeting, we met a couple times. He always had a TV on next to his desk. He always had CNN playing, and when we were meeting, he had it kind of turned down, muted. And out of the corner of my eye, I remember this one, I saw Chris, I saw some Chris. Is that my mom? Told her I'd be home, but dinner's gonna be cold. No, I saw Chris on, there was some clip from Tommy Boy, and I look over, and I at that point, I'm pretty used to seeing my brother on TV, so that wasn't shocking. So I go to, I go like, my first thought was, oh, what's he up to now? And I turn up the volume, and right when I turn it up, the screen jumps to outside his apartment in Chicago, the John Hancock building, with an ambulance up front, and the anchor saying, "We just learned that Chris Farley just died of a drug overdose." That's how I learned that my little brother had just died. And my first thought, well, for a long time after that, I thought, like, how am I ever going to process this? Who goes through this kind of public thing? I thought, I thought, oh, I'm so unique. I had Access Hollywood knocking on my door that night with the film crew, like, can we get a comment? Like, luckily for me, I was used to the media by that time. I knew that I didn't have to, I could tell them to go to hell, which I did. It was fun. So, but what I learned is, in the 25 years, immediately after that, in the 25 years since, is that I wasn't alone. I wasn't unique. I actually share that loss and that grief with a lot of people. That number has only grown in the years since. And the drug that killed Chris, the heroin, I thought, how could anything be worse than that? And here we are. We did find a drug that's worse than that kills almost immediately. So I wasn't prepared for that, but I had to figure out what to do. There was something, I didn't want to trust. I certainly didn't. I knew I didn't want to trust my Irish instinct of, like, we don't talk about this shit. We don't. I knew I had to talk about it. I knew I needed to talk about it, and not so, a little bit, for my dealing with my grief and the loss, but mostly, if I'm honest, I was a marketing professional, and I knew that there was a lot of power in Chris's name, a lot of brand, assets, and I said, I'm going to go out, I'm going to talk to go out into schools and maybe help, with the awareness I get with the name, help somebody, his audience at that time were teens and young adults. I'm like, maybe I can help them, at least one, not go down that same road. So I started going into schools, and it was interesting. What I found out right away when I went into schools was that a lot of the programs at that point, I was just doing prevention. A lot of the programs were very, information-based, education-based, because what's the mission of the building that they're in schools? That's what they do best, and delivered by these professional teachers that had that skill. I knew I didn't have that skill, and B, I knew I didn't, need to replicate that. So I had to figure out what to do. We've given all these kids all this great knowledge, but we're still having a problem. So what is it? What is that tool? And also, I also knew that, if I had to get through and reach this young audience, I had two choices, two things that gets their attention: music and humor. I only took 3 years of piano lessons, so humor it was. So I'm like, so all right, so how do I, talk about this very serious subject matter using humor, using Chris's name? Well, luckily I was pretty good at marketing, so I figured it out. Actually, what I did was I looked at my brothers, not just Chris, but my brothers Kevin and John, who went through Second City in Chicago, and as did my son now, and he's out in LA. They all, went into professional acting. I clearly didn't take my example, and business clearly wasn't, probably wasn't good for me either. But anyway, I looked at this thing called improv that they learned. Their comedy, their form of comedy is improv, and I studied it. And I learned that it was developed by this woman in Chicago many years ago that was dealing with at-risk inner city kids on the South Side, Cabrini Green area, and she developed these games and these exercises to teach them how to communicate better, how to form connection, ensembles as they called it. And then Second City found it, and they thought they could make some a humor model out. But originally it was to form connection. So I went into schools and I started to teach improv, trying to build what I called peer enhanced environments as opposed to peer pressure environments. How do you build that connection? How do you learn to communicate better? And it was amazing. So about 20 years ago, I moved back to Wisconsin. My oldest kids were getting into middle school, and it was like now or never. If I don't get, if I don't get them back to Wisconsin, I'll never will. So luckily I did. And so we moved back here, and so I started doing, going into the schools around here, and doing some really neat stuff. And then I got hooked up with a woman that had a clinic that was dealing with teens in recovery. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's interesting. I actually work at that clinic now, all these years later. And so I started more and more into the recovery side of things. What was interesting during that time, I knew that I probably shouldn't be drinking either. So I would have these bouts. I had kids, these little kids. I had this, wife who grew up in New York that I made to move to Wisconsin. Wasn't happy about that. That's why she's my ex-wife now. But I had a lot of stuff on my plate. But I knew but I was having all these, issues in so I probably shouldn't drink. So I would stop, and I was able to, put 5 years together, and do all this stuff. And during that time, I would go into meetings, and it was just like my family dynamic. I could always hear somebody across the room, sharing their story, and I'm like, I don't drink that much, so I guess I'm okay. I don't need to be here. I'm okay. Just like we did with Chris. I'm like, I'm okay. And 5 years I could manage. Then there was always that thought in my head that it's St. Patrick's Day. You can have one Guinness. You've been sober for 5 years. And I, convinced myself. It was very easy to convince myself. And so I would have that one Guinness, and then it was 2. And then the next thing I know, I'm back on varsity, starting 5. I'm like, how did it, and then just have longer years of drinking. I'm like, man, and then I did that again. I would stop again. And I just, I thought it was just willpower. Just stop drinking, and I had all this stuff, but I was still kind of creating all these train wrecks would pop up, and I'm like, God, what? But I'm not drinking. Why? What's going on? And I would just kind of get tired of it and give in. And so the great thing is, so I remember gosh, I remember going to, it was a Sunday in October. I went, it was a friend of mine from Baraboo was playing, he was playing, and I knew he was in recovery too, but I just, he was playing at Octopi on a Sunday afternoon. I'm like, I can go see my buddy and spend the afternoon drinking. Great. Sounds like a great plan to me. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening to him, and he just looks so like, he's doing what he loved and he's being sober. And I'm like, I walk up the next day, I'm like, I want that. I still didn't know what that meant. So that's when I stopped. And then luckily for me, like 4 months later, I got a call from this woman who I had been doing the teen kind of recovery groups with at this clinic that I work with, Shelly, that I got good friends with, and I kind of lost track of her, but she had helped so many people in this community. And she called me up one day and she said, "Hey, how you doing? Just, I haven't talked to you in a while," with no agenda on her mind. And I said, "I'm doing great. As a matter of fact," and I told her, with all, with all pride, I said, I haven't had a drink in 4 months. Expecting a lot more applause than I got. She said, "That's great." She goes, "That's great. Good for you." She goes, "We should have coffee." I said, "Shelly, I'd love to have coffee." She was great. "Meet me Saturday morning, 9 o'clock in the basement of the Presbyterian Church." I'm like, God damn it. Oh, man. Okay. I know where this is going. But it was that one person who I trusted and who accepted me. And how do you say no to somebody that's helped so many people in this community? I went, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And I went, and it wasn't pretty at first, but I slowly, my first thought was, oh, Jesus, the rest of my life with these fucks, like I didn't sign up, like these are not my best friends, which isn't, no, it's not the point at all. But instead of like listening to people like how much they drank and stuff like that, I started to like open my ears. I'm like, wow, yeah, I've behaved like that. I've had broken relationships like that. I've had job loss like that. It was like it had nothing to do with drinking. What I was hearing, this connecting to, was all the stuff that I was really wanted to change in my life. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. It was still hard for me. I was still, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a bit, but you know, humor, was my coping mechanism when I felt like, and I would do that. I would always try to say something funny. My favorite was, "Hi, my name's Tom, and he's an alcoholic." Well, that's what he said. And everyone's like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Come on, that's funny stuff." Um, but then I really started to kind of seeing that there's something more here. And in the next couple of months, though, there was this opening. The treatment center that I work with now, Rosecrans down in Rockford, actually bought the clinic, Shelly's clinic here in Madison. And Shelly said, they're looking for somebody here, in Wisconsin, to be the outreach business development person. And my first thought was, well, that's smart. Stop sending Illinois people up here to, do that job. I got this. And it was wonderful. And so I started doing that, and I said, I'm working with this wonderful clinic, and I haven't looked back. And the biggest thing was, it was just because it was during COVID, and I was working for Dane County, United Way of Dane County, which I loved. But this came along, and I, for 20 years, been talking about, first of all, somebody else's addiction. I just started talking about my recovery journey, and seeing that was actually, I got more attention, when I started talking about my story. And also, it was COVID. I started to do some webinars with Hazelton, where Chris had gotten a lot of help, and we were talking about what's coming after COVID, that this storm is brewing, and we had a epidemic before the pandemic. People are going to be leaving, this pandemic with behaviors and growing addictions that I didn't have going in. So I'm like, I need to give people help on top of just talking about it. So I took the job, and it's it's been fantastic. And I learned a lot. One of the first things that they asked me to do was they asked me to talk at it was still virtual, but it was our alumni retreat. It was a Saturday all day, and we were going to talk to people that got through our program, and they wanted me to tell my story, to kind of, like wrap up the day with something funny. Farley. So I sat there all day listening to a lot of people that went through our alumni that went, but also a lot of clinicians that were talking about this addiction, this disease that we have. And I was listening to one of the clinicians that I was working with at the time, and she was talking about trauma. I'm like, well, I don't know what trauma is. Trauma is something bad happens in your life. Your life's going this way, and then trauma. Now you're over here. And she's like, yeah, that's kind of the big concept, of big T concept. But the thing is, there's all these little things that happen. And as humans, we become collectors of trauma, and we don't even know it. And she's describing that, and my mind's just going crazy. I'm like, that's what it is? And I'm thinking about it. By the time it gets to me like 45 minutes later, and I'm supposed to tell my story, I'm like, time out. I got to process this stuff. I got very used to sharing at this point in my life. So I go, this is great. This is wild. I'm just like, let me just kind of, throw this out there. It's like, do you know what trauma was like in the Farley family? And again, it was a Zoom call, and I'd see all the squares, everyone going, oh. I'm like, no, it's not that bad. I hope. No, trauma was in my family that we had one emotion that we used for everything. Can you imagine what that emotion was? Humor, absolutely. If somebody was stressed in my family, we laughed. If somebody fell and hurt themselves in my family, we laughed. Not to be mean, we just didn't like their pain. We thought our humor could bring them out of it. And if somebody was angry in our family, we laughed. We still do. We laughed. But if somebody was experiencing joy in our family, we laughed, which isn't even the same thing. We couldn't go to the positive end of the scale. We had to, our coping mechanism was humor, which turned into a trauma because we didn't have any other emotions, that we had developed, except we did develop one other emotion when we didn't get the reaction that we wanted, when somebody fell and hurt themselves and we're still in pain because, they fell and hurt themselves. Then we would get frustrated and angry, and we would ping pong between these two, but we didn't learn any of these other things. And so not having that wealth of emotion and understanding how we were feeling, the only way for us, to deal with that, to manage all the range of emotions that you have, was to drink. That's why that's one of the reasons why we did it, because we were, our emotions were getting the best of us, and we knew to, just numb that. So that's what we got used to doing until I got into recovery and learned all these other things. I remember the first time in recovery, somebody said, well, I used to do a gratitude journal. What the hell's a gratitude journal? Like, oh, we just get a piece of paper and write gratitude and just start listing things out. I remember the first time we did it, I stared at this blank page for like a half hour. Like, really? Nothing? You're not grateful for anything? And it's not that I wasn't grateful. I was grateful for the easy stuff. I was grateful for my kids. I was grateful that I get to live in this beautiful state of Wisconsin. I'm grateful for my health. That was a joke. But I was missing all these little things that happen every single day, that can radically change how you feel and how you manage these emotions, these little gratitudes. Starting to develop, starting with gratitude and humility and grace and all these things that I've learned in recovery in this late stage of life has been amazing. So I've learned so much in the course of, especially that whole trauma thing. So I, this is the part of the presentation where my ADHD kicks in, and it's just, I'm going to start just jumping all around. It's not going to make any sense. Buckle up. I'm just going to whatever comes to my mind, I'm just going to say it. So, it's wonderful. So two things that I learned in recovery, and most of them happened in that summer of 2020. Two things notable. One was at that time I was still working for United Way, and we sponsored, as we still do, an event that's still run down by the YWCA down in downtown, called the Racial Justice Summit, and it was 3 days, and we sponsored it. So they, my CEO Renee said, "If you want to go, go." And it was that like that rough summer. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go like I do. I early AA meetings, just show up and shut up, and maybe you'll learn something. And I did. It was fantastic. But one of the great things was the last speaker on the first day said, "I'm going to send you home with some homework." He said, "I want you to go home, and I want you to think of where in your life do you experience deep belonging." And I know where he was coming from. There were people in our communities that never get to feel that. And he wanted us to get in touch with that. And I said, okay. So I went home. I'm like, where do I feel deep belonging? Is it my first obvious choice? Is it my family? No, definitely not. We all love each other, but it's tough. It's a beautiful, wonderful, dysfunctional Irish family. So that wasn't it. No, check that one. Is it my work? I mean, I was working for United Way. I loved, my community and giving back. I love the people I worked with. But that wasn't deep belonging either. Is it my alumni group at Georgetown that I'm love and I'm very active in? These are the best friends in the world that but no, that's not it. Is it my faith? No, I'm Catholic. We've got some issues. So it wasn't that. We're working on it, though. We're working on it. The only thing I could come up with was my recovery community, that deep belonging, where I could walk in, and it's not, are these my friends, or, it's whatever, but I know I belong there. And I speak all over the country. I love finding, meetings wherever I am, and everyone's looks differently, and had different life experiences. But when we start talking about that's deep belonging. Now, what's really neat about that is how that makes me feel. And what I love about the recovery community, because that first time I walked in, when I said, really, the rest of my life, and the thing is, it isn't, where I spend the rest of my life. I'm a social person. I need to be out there. But when I'm out in public and I start to feel the way I used to feel, like performing or not being myself, I know where I got to go. I need to call somebody, go to a meeting. I know, because that's my barometer, that's my base. That's where I need to go. Do I want to spend the rest of my life there? No, but that's where I'm always going to know how I'm supposed to feel. Because my whole life, I was putting this person out there that I thought everyone wanted to see, that I needed to be, all my my college friends, first of all my roommates at Georgetown, they're all CEOs. It's a real pain in the ass. There's no way I was going to ever compete with that, but I thought, like, okay, they're in these size houses, so I need to have that size house. They have these jobs, so I was never, it's always, you don't understand. I need that job. I needed my kids to act a certain way so I could be that person. I needed my ex-wife to be a certain way so I could be that person. I needed you to support that person. and no one wanted to, you know? And so that was always a struggle. I didn't get it. So I was always, then I became, somebody's brother. That's a whole other issue. For a long time, I tried to maintain that, and that was brutal. But again, that's not me. I mean, I could be, and I think all my brothers probably say the same thing. We could be in the middle of a crowded room, okay, bar, center of attention, making everyone laugh, and never feel more isolated in our lives. That's what it was like. And because we were putting somebody out there that I'll give you this person that you want, but I'm not happy about it. I don't like it. And the only way I can do it is to drink it, And I thought, oh man, I thought I was going to be the rest of my life doing that. And I'm like, so glad that wasn't the case. So now I still go out to, even bars. I mean, if I want to eat on a Friday night, I know where I got to go. But I'm there for the right reasons. If I feel myself acting out or being that other person, I know I can either leave. A lot of times I tell myself, you don't owe this group anything. You don't have to be somebody else for them, but if it gets too hard, I know to leave, and I know I got to call somebody. I go to a meeting. So it's been really, my recovery community is that sense of belonging has been fantastic. And so, I talked to a lot of people, and I remember being this way too. Talked to a lot of people that are right at that stage, at that point I was before I made that decision, like, okay, I got to do this. And the way I describe it is like that decision, that recovery, whatever you want to call it, it's like a gate, it's like a doorway, and you do all this work beforehand. You're like, you admit that you've got to do this. Maybe you've had an intervention with family members. You've researched all the places, all the options that you can do. You do all that stuff, and you get it up one step before going through that door, and you stop and you freeze, because our minds go, I know exactly what my life's going to be like. I know what it's going to be like. That's why we say 24 hours, just stick to that, because our minds go there. And what I tell people is, what I found is, do you know what's on the other side of that door? The same fear that made you stop on this side. Life doesn't, get happier because you walk through that door. Your financial stresses don't disappear because you walk through that door. Your relationships don't automatically get better because you walk back that door. It's still life. But the difference that is true is that on that side of the door, your life gets better, and it was never going to get better the longer you remain on this side of the door. And I needed to trust myself. I needed, other people. I needed to trust other people. And I walked to that door, and I did find that life did get better. Not on my time frame, not on the way I wanted it to be, but because I was, one of the things I was, finding those little things that I'm grateful for. I'm like, yeah, okay, it is better. I used to do talks like this 20 years ago when I was talking about somebody else's addiction, and I would go home and I would like, all right, what's for dinner? Now I'm going to leave here with such gratitude. I'll get halfway home just thinking about, this was amazing that I got to do this and be here with you telling my story. I never did that before. That was amazing. That's life getting better. And, that's a difference. So that was wonderful. A couple of things that I learned, about, doing this improv thing, and what it, how the kind of how it makes you feel. What I love the most about improv is that it's done in a group. We talk about mental illness, we talk about addiction as diseases of isolation. We've been talking about that everyone knows that. Everyone's heard it. Everyone knows it. What we don't talk about is the flip side of that coin is we cannot heal in isolation. We're humans. We're hardwired for connection. We need that connection. That's one of the things I call the blessings of COVID is now all of a sudden the rest of the world suddenly understood what isolation and disconnection feels like. The thing is, there have been people in our communities, in our schools, even in our families that have felt that isolation their entire lives. The rest of the world felt it for like 18 months, 2 years. And what happened? And they got in fights in Walmart. They got kicked off airplanes. It wasn't pretty, because we don't like disconnection. Makes us angry. We need to connect. And so I love going in and kind of talking about that, forming your ensemble, forming, this connection where, I usually, when I have a PowerPoint, I put up a slide of this orchestra, and all these instruments. And if every instrument's allowed to play at the best of its ability and capability, that song's beautiful. You can have one tuba on one side and a clarinet on the other. The tuba isn't the best one there because it's the biggest, the shiniest, the deepest voice. No, even if one note is played on a cymbal, if it makes that song, like, that's beautiful. Some people, it's, all they're going to do is give you that one note, but that's 100% of who they are. And, to hear it is a gift. So that's what I try to kind of create this. And so I used to go into schools and do these games, and I learned some amazing stuff. One of the first times when I moved back to Wisconsin, I did a talk up in Rio, Wisconsin. It's like this big. I don't even know where it is. I was up in Rio. I hope it's up. Was it up? Yeah. So I went to Rio. I went to their gym. It was about this big. And I go, let me show you this improv is. Give me a game. We're going to play a game. Give me one person. And there's a game, it was called One Word at a Time, where you tell a story, one word, two people are one person, they're going to play one person, tell a story one word at a time. And I go, give me a volunteer. And this kid's hand shoots up. And my thought was like, oh, the enthusiastic kid. I had to share a bedroom with that kid. I said, come on up. Come on up. And I see every teacher in the auditorium just kind of go, I'm like, so I get up there. I go, since the dawn of civilization, we've been storytellers. We've kind of lost that art. So we're gonna tell a story one word at a time. But and the best stories are the ones that have a conflict, because it adds drama. It's exciting. But what do you have to do at the end of the story with that conflict? You have to resolve it. So I said, here's our story. We got an F on our report card. And we have to tell our parents one word at a time. And every school I went into, I would say, what did we get an F in? And like 99% math. I'm like, I don't know what school it was, but somebody yelled out art. I'm like, God, I love that. Because an F in art spells one of my favorite words. I love that. So it was beautiful. But I said, so we got an F. So I go, all right, I'll start. I go, Mom, he goes, Dad, I have something to tell you. And we're going back and forth. And as we were, developing the story and building the story, he would say a word that he wanted me to have there was a natural follow-up word that he wanted me to say. So he would say this word and I wouldn't say the word. Because the thing about improv is there's one rule, which is the rule of yes and, meaning whatever's given, whatever's said, you say yes to it. Not literally yes, but it's a gift. You say yes, but the and is you can take it, to the next step, always in a positive direction. So I would say a different word and he had to accept it. And we were slowly getting along, please sit down, and then it was going kind of long. So I was trying to wrap it up, and I was leading him. I would say a word. I want him to say the next word. He wouldn't say it. I'm like, okay, you're getting it. So we ended up that we resolved that the F stood for fantastic instead of failure. And everyone clapped. It was great. So I went to the cafeteria afterwards and sat with a bunch of teachers. And over my lukewarm grilled cheese, I said, what was wrong? That kid was great. And they said, you don't understand. That's one of the most autistic kids we have in the school. And what you just did, his peers will never look at him the same again. And he may not have that level of self-esteem that he felt at that moment. He'll never forget it. And you're walking out of this building, you've changed us. I'm like, I did what? I'm like, I didn't get into this to do that. I just needed attention. I just wanted to talk, you know. But it was amazing. I did the same thing in a friend of mine down in Illinois when his kids were in high school. They had a after school. They were in Lake Forest. They had an after school teen group, and said, "Come down and do that improv thing." So I went and did the exact same thing. Give me a volunteer, and this girl in the front row who had some sort of developmental, she has some issues, I go, come on up. And we did the same thing, mom, dad, and we struggled. It was, she was having a hard time, but I had to accept it. We were going to get it done. But in the middle of it, when she was really struggling, I saw her aide start to come up from the back of the room. And I went, nope, we got this. And she saw this. And she's like, probably the first time in her life that she was given the opportunity to do something on her own. She's like, I can do this on my own? I'm like, yeah, because I'm going to accept whatever. I don't know what she was feeling, but I was feeling it. And we got through it. It wasn't pretty. But again, her peers probably never saw her without her, and I changed. I'm sure they changed, she changed, I changed. It was amazing. So that's what connection does. It's amazing, and I love that. Wow, I really am long-winded, aren't I? There's so much. I'll come back for a second round, but I didn't want to leave here before opening up to questions. So, because I want to address whatever you're thinking of. So, yeah. I'll tell you something that I did during COVID. See, so I was asked to at Connections Counseling, where I work now, they were doing virtual IOPs, intensive outpatient, and they said, do your improv thing. It's like, well, that's improv. It's something you do in person. Like, okay, I'll do it virtually. So I called up my son in LA. He had just gone through second setting. Oh, what do I do? He goes, here's what you do, Dad. You ask everyone on the Zoom call, go back to that story thing that we're storytellers. So go back and ask everyone on there to take off one shoe and tell a story about their shoe. I said, okay. So I said, everyone take a story. So the first guy was like, this is my shoe. My grandma bought it for me. I got it for Christmas from my grandma 2 years ago. She died last year. So every time I wear this, I think my grandma, I love the shoe. Next person was like, I got this, at Walmart. I wear it out in the snow, rain. I don't care, but it's comfortable. I don't care about it, but I love this shoe because it was cheap and it was great. Next person was like, I didn't have a shoe on, but here's my sock. It's striped. I like stripes. It's rainbow. And so we went through that film. And when they were telling these stories, I saw, not only were they so intent on telling the story, but everyone else had a smile on their face because they wanted to hear the story, and it was great. And then my son said, when they done that, then go back and ask everyone to now pick out somebody else's story and have them repeat verbatim that person's story. And so I did that. And the one person said, well, Bill had a shoe that he bought at Walmart and he wears it out in the rain. And, he doesn't care, it was cheap. And so it wasn't perfect. But I went back and I said, now the person, when you were hearing your story about your shoe, how did that feel like to be heard? And this is in the middle of COVID. It was like fantastic. I'm like, okay, let's acknowledge that feeling. That does feel good to be heard and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's just those little things that I changed all the time. And of course, as I said, my story changed from talking about somebody else's addiction to my own recovery, which I love talking about now. I mean, that's so it's always changing because I'm always learning stuff because I'm listening. I don't know. Any other questions? Yes, little boy. Yes. What do you mean? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like this, like Q&A type stuff? Yeah. Yeah. What I'm hearing now is, and it's not so much that, so when somebody, what's beautiful was when they do raise their hand, I talk to teachers afterwards and they go, oh, I'm so glad that person asked that question because we were worried about that student. And now we know kind of what to do. A lot of times somebody will come up afterwards and say, hey, my brother's struggling, what can I do? What can I say? Or I'm really feeling, COVID really messed me up. I'm really in isolation. What can I do? And I'm like, talk and do like it's wonderful things happen. They're not talking about social media, this or that. They're talking about isolation and how they're feeling. And they're willing to talk about it to a level I never, learned. They're really embracing this and they need that connection. So that's mostly what we talk about. Yeah, Bonnie. It's funny. And I love that I always have that opportunity. When they were growing up, it wasn't always so pretty. I was on a podcast a couple of years ago, and the host asked me, "It's like, are you a better parent than your parents were to you?" I'm like, that's a shitty question. I'm like, honestly, I wanted to be. I wish I was. I tried to be, but to be honest, I was given the playbook that my dad was given. Like I only knew what I was given, and so going back to that humor thing, my dad was this teasing kind of dad, and so was I. And I remember talking about, like, I remember my one of my little girls coming to me and saying, stuff like, Dad, I'm afraid of the dark. And I would say, like, well, I would be too if I had that under my bed. You know, funny stuff. Didn't help with their trauma though. You know, and but now as a parent, I get to acknowledge that. I'm like, and make amends and in my recovery, and yeah, I wish but I can be better now. And and then that's happening. Like again, during that summer, COVID 2020, my other daughter's out in New York, and she came home because there was that break in COVID. It's like, it's over. It wasn't over. But a lot of the restaurants were opening up, and so she came back. She wanted to visit Madison or some of her friends, and so we went to lunch over in Hilldale at Bar Taco when we were outside, and we walk up, and the maitre d' goes, "Well, we're still kind of in a protocol, so we don't have menus. You order on your phone, and we don't have wait staff, but somebody from the kitchen will come out with your food." And I got all boomerish. I go, "I got a question on this ordering thing. If I'm on my phone ordering my lunch, and my daughter's on her phone during her lunch, but I want to pay for both, how does that happen?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, if you need a paper menu, we can have one." I go, "I didn't say that." And I got really kind of, like, damn it. And I caught myself. I said, "You know what? I'm sorry. We'll figure it out." I brought a millennial. I'll let her do it. And I said, "I'm sorry. We got it. Are you good? We're good. All right. Love you, man." And then I turned to my daughter and I said, "I'm so sorry. I wanted to be present with you, and she paused and she said, "Dad, when we were growing up, that happened all the time. The littlest thing, and we just knew to stay away from you the rest of the day because you would carry it with you. Everyone paid for it because you just couldn't let it go. And so when you started doing that, I'm like, I tensed up. I'm like, oh shit, here we go. But you stopped. And you did something you never did when we were growing up. You apologized to him and to me. And what that felt like to have her notice that was amazing. And what I noticed, what I learned later on that day or the next day is that's a relationship repairing itself. And I was just trying to be the best person I can be. When she was growing up, I tried to I needed her to be a certain way, and because I was trying to put something out and putting so much effort into these relationships. What I didn't know at the time, I was pushing people away. And now I'm just trying to be the most authentic, best person I can be, control the things I can control, and letting everyone else be who they are. I'm not a threat anymore. And you know what's happening? People are coming back, and it is this relation. This is my oldest daughter. I care so much about this relation. I worked so hard for it all my life. And now I'm just being who I am. And it's coming back, in the pace that I would have liked. No. Is it, automatically is this great relationship that I wanted to be, tried so hard to be? No. But it's the relationship I have. And I got to be very grateful for that, which I am. And again, that's something that it gets better, not on my time frame, but it will, get better, which is amazing. Yeah. 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 Well, um, long before that, Madison police made me walk a line, but that was step one. No, it's true though. So that was the biggest thing for me was what was kind of it was fear and self-doubt. And it was controlling me. And what I like to say, one of the first things I heard in AA, and I hear it every meeting I go to, is the words rigorous honesty. And my first thought was like, that's a thing. I can do that. I mean, people do that. That sounds kind of dangerous to me. I was a marketing professional, and I'm Irish, so I know how to craft a story. I know how to bullshit. So when they said, we live, try to be as rigorously honest and with yourself, I'm like, the more I do that, the more I try to be as honest as I can. There's nothing left to fear. There's no self-doubt. The more authentic I am, how can I, I don't know if that answered your question, but no, yeah, but it's fear is crippling, and self-doubt. And for me, it was being comfortable with who I am. It's learning. It's one of the first things I learned as a public speaker is, when you see a public speaker, you're not seeing somebody who's really skilled at this. This is why adults fear public speaking, because it's true. It's a fear. It's not natural. I'm standing up here and you're all staring at me. It's weird. It's freaking weird. But and like 5 minutes before this, I'm like, oh shit, what am I gonna say? I was like totally in my head. But as soon as I got here, I saw you all standing there and I had a microphone in my hand. I was so comfortable, as I like to say, comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what I've kind of embraced life that way. It's like you can't fear the uncomfortable things in life because they're always going to be there. You just have to get very comfortable with some things. Um, you know, bears, it's okay to be fearful of. You still run from them, but everything else, it's like, especially with relationships, it's like if you're being like, I used to fear what people thought of me. It was always directed at somebody else, like what they, and now it's just me. How do I, how do I how do you have fear for that? Like I'm just being who I am. What, I can't control any of that other stuff, you know? Um, I was asked once, on a podcast also, what's it, somebody said, what's the difference between long-term recovery and long-term recovery? And I'm like, I don't know. I just know I'm in recovery. It's like, but if I have to answer that question, I'll answer it in this way, relationship with my ex-wife. And and it's the best way I know how to answer that. It's like when I first got divorced and people ask me, why'd you guys get divorced? My answer was because my wife didn't respect me and didn't support me and she did herself there and blah, blah, blah. And I believed it. And then I got in recovery and people asked me, and I'm like, well, if I'm honest, I wasn't very respectful and supportive either. And then I got a little deeper into my recovery and a little bit more grateful stuff. And now my own, if somebody were to ask me that, my only answer is I wasn't very supportive and respectful of my ex-wife. Period. What her role is nothing. And because I believe that, this person is now, back in my life, because we have these 3 kids that we love more than anyone else on this planet. So why would I, the alternative of not ever like, so is it the relationship, as I said, that I wanted, that I tried so hard to have? No, but it's what I have, and I'm grateful for that. And to be completely sincere and honest about that feeling, my kids see that. My ex-wife now is we're friends again like we were in college. We can talk. So that's a repaired relationship. Is it repaired to how I want it? No, but it's nice to have. I thought that was gone. You know. Any other? Yeah, I will now. No, a gratitude journal. Yeah, I've tried here and there. What I want to do, I did for a long time. I used to do that every time, but I want to get into journaling and writing, because I do enjoy that. But I do this instead. I don't know. I talk about my gratitudes openly all the time. So there. Yeah. Nope. I'm kidding. um, yeah, we all do. We all, I know, but the thing is, and I know my father certainly did. And it was, he died a year later. My mom, I think, still, doesn't like to talk about it. It's hard. I'm sure I felt that. I actually, it wasn't just guilt. In my recovery, I get to, um, all those emotions of guilt. I get to be honest about that. I get to be honest about resentment. When you have a sibling that had all this, all his addictions. He got all this attention, and I was trying to do the right thing, and I'm like, why is he sucking all the wind, all the attention out of the room? And I'm trying to but I'm doing all the right stuff. And that created all sorts of stuff. And I had to be honest about that. One of the first things that was easy for me to do was to release the addictive Chris from the brother that I love, and say that wasn't Chris. That was Chris in an active addiction. And yeah. So, but that's something I'm always, little by little chipping away at. All those, grief, resentments, guilt, all that stuff. And it comes and go, but when you're constantly working on that stuff and identifying that feeling when it comes up, and working on it, like, man, it's better than bearing it, you know? Yeah. Yeah, what I go back to is that connection. I, in the course of my, the clinic I work at a couple of years ago, we listened to a webinar, and it was on suicide. And this clinician was talking about, just how we talk about it now, and what's the right terminology and all this kind of stuff. And I'm listening to it. I wasn't. I was kind of, 88. Said I was kind of floating around, and I thought I heard her say. I don't think she did, but this is my story, so this is why I'm saying it. I heard her say, like, the neat thing about suicide, and I went, what the fuck? What? What did she say? She said the thing about is you can talk somebody out of it. You can't talk somebody out of addiction, out of cancer, out of this, but at that moment, you can talk somebody out of it. But it requires conversation, it requires a connection. You can't do it yourself. So, that anyone, it's that connection, the smallest little thing, and as I had conversation earlier before this, about this subject is like, the hard thing is that you can't always be there for that conversation, and even with my brother, you go through these emotions, sometimes you're angry, sometimes you're worried, sometimes you're overly empathetic, all this kind of stuff. And then sometimes you just say, I can't take it anymore. I got to walk away. And at that point, you just got to hope that somebody else takes your place, But again, with Chris at that point, at that time, that last time, yeah, he was alone, and that's a tough thing to think about. The isolation, even amongst your friends. I'm haunted by it's so vivid in my mind. When Chris got out of treatment one time, it was a Christmas Eve, and we were all kind of sitting around like we always did, opening presents the night before, drinking brandies and there was Chris amongst us all with his mug of coffee, just trying to be sober. Because we thought, it's Chris's problem. It has nothing to do with us. We couldn't even provide that, atmosphere of like somebody's struggling, and here's what's going, and trying to connect, trying to belong in this family. And boy, talk about, the guilt and the grief. Yeah, that's one of those things that I go back to. I'm like, I wish you could have done better, but you can't dwell on those things. You got to acknowledge it, and and work on it. So, anything else? Well, thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
So thanks again to Tom for coming out, and he's part of our community, and having him partner with us and be able to be here is super awesome. Just want to do a quick thank you again to the library for letting us have this space. Also, Amy, this was recorded because she's a queen back there. She got recorded for us. So if you guys want to come back to it or share it with friends, it's going to be on the Waunakee Public Library YouTube and also on the Waunakee Cares Coalition website. And then we have our 2 wellness events coming up next week and the week after that. So hope to see you there again. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate you guys.